Hey guys, so I'm one of those people that collects old books not only for their contents but also for their looks. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that, but if I'm at a thrift store or an antique mall and I see just books that look beautiful, I can't resist. I'm gonna buy them and maybe I'll get around to reading them, but maybe not, and maybe they'll just be a statement piece. Anyways, I'm just going through my old bedroom and I find this little brown book, Stories by English Authors. It's from 1900, published in New York by Charles Scribner's Sons, and there's 7 short stories in here. And so I'm thinking, why don't I just sit down and read this little decorative book and see if there's actually some good stuff in here. I have a feeling I might enjoy it more than I expect. I know years ago in high school I read probably 3 or 4 little antique books like this that I had picked up and was pleasantly surprised by their content. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to sit down and try to read through this whole thing and I'll let you know how it goes. Hi, Taps. Is it on?
Yeah.
For sure?
Yeah.
Okay, I turn around and be busy. So I read through this whole little brown book this afternoon, and I have to say I was very pleasantly surprised with these stories. The first story is The Inconsiderate Waiter by J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan. And this one, I realized as I was reading it that I've actually read this book before. I think I did pick it up a couple years ago and read through it for the same purpose as this challenge, just to see what was actually in this book that I was just going to use for decor. And this is a great story. It's about an aristocratic man who he comes to this club and he gets served by this waiter like every day pretty much. And he ends up learning a little bit about this waiter's personal life. He learns that the waiter's wife is sick. Against his will, he starts to kind of care for this waiter and care for his family and his circumstances. And the whole book is very satirical, where this aristocrat is just in complete denial about the fact that he gives a second thought to this poor waiter and his family. It's just so ridiculous how this man, who clearly does have a heart inside his chest, is just so embarrassed to be kind to somebody and to care for somebody, and he doesn't want any of his cronies to find out about it. He's secretive about the help that he's giving this waiter and his family just because he thinks it'll make him look bad. And the irony is that actually it would make him look good in the eyes of anyone who matters, the eyes of anybody else who has a heart. So that's a great story. I highly recommend it. And then there's The Black Poodle by F. Anstey. This one is also hilarious and just ridiculous. It's about this man who moves next door to a family that has a daughter who he starts to fall in love with. This family has this black poodle, and as this man starts to get to know this family, he realizes that the family is obsessed with this poodle. They think it can do no wrong, even though the poodle is very misbehaved, and this man is terrified of it because it tries to attack him and so forth. But this family can see no wrong in their poodle. And then one day, this young man accidentally shoots the poodle and doesn't know what to do because he's trying to win this young lady's heart, but she's obsessed with her dog. So he buries it in his backyard. And then the family just assumes that the dog has run away, and this young man is very sympathetic and tries to console them. And then he lets this young woman know his affections for her. And she says, I actually don't really trust you. She's suspicious of him because she says, you never showed any interest or care for the dog before, and now that it's gone, all of a sudden you're too sympathetic. It just doesn't make sense to her. So she says to him, you work a government job. What good is the government for if not to find my dog? I'll consider marrying you if you show that you actually care about this dog and you do whatever you can to bring it back. So he goes ahead and does that. He puts out advertisements, he goes to the pound, he talks to people, he looks at all kinds of dogs, tries to find this dog that he knows is dead. And eventually he does find a black poodle that's almost identical to this dead dog. And so he brings it back, he puts its collar on it, the dead dog's collar on this new dog because he had saved that. And then he presents it to the family and they believe it's their dog. They're so happy, and this girl agrees to marry him. She's all over him, she's in love with him. Yeah, but that's not where the story ends, and I think for the sake of not giving away spoilers, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but the ending is quite sad for our protagonist, but hilarious for us readers. The next story is called That Brute Simmons by Arthur Morrison, and it's about this man who marries a woman. She's a widow. Supposedly her first husband died at sea. And so this guy Simmons marries her and realizes that she's a complete micromanager. She just is all over him and she's on to him about every little thing. His trousers have to be this way and her house needs to be clean this way. And she's just one of those ladies that just can't sit still and she's nitpicking him for everything. Anyways, one day she goes out and then her old husband shows up and essentially he says he wants to see his wife, and then he thinks that her new husband is gonna, get all defensive and tell him to get lost or whatever. So he says, if you pay me this amount of money, I'll go away and you can stay married to this woman and I'll leave you guys alone. And the second husband refuses to pay the money. So they're getting nowhere and neither of them is really wanting to keep this poor wife. And then she comes home and her first husband jumps out the window before she can realize that he's there and he's still alive. The second husband, the Simmons, is left with this woman and then he just walks out on her. And that's how the story ends. And she never understands what happened or why he left, but it was because of the visit from her first husband, who she still thinks is dead. Anyways, that was a very bad explanation of the story. You should read it for yourself because it's quite funny. The next story is called A Rose of the Ghetto by Israel Zangwill. And this one, the point of it was less clear to me, but it was still very funny. It's about a matchmaker. So this young guy goes to a matchmaker because he wants to get married, and the matchmaker proposes that he marries this wealthy, so he'll get a good dowry, but very unattractive young lady. She's a hunchback, and he meets her and he just really doesn't want to marry her. Then he decides he wants to marry his friend and co-worker, whose name is Rose, and she's less wealthy. The matchmaker is not super keen on this. He still wants him to marry the hunchback, but he proposes to this Rose's dad, hey, this young man, he's a really good guy, he wants to marry your daughter. And the father's just not really for it because the young man isn't rich, and so there's a bit of a squabble about how much dowry she will actually get. And then they're at the altar and the father doesn't have the money that he promised. There is a resolution. I'm not gonna say what happens, but then the story kind of just ends there and it's kind of like, okay. Wasn't the best one in this book, I'll say that. The next one was An Idyll of London by Beatrice Harraden. This one almost made me cry. This one really tugged the heartstrings. It's about a lonely old man who has nobody in life and a lonely young girl who has nobody in life who become friends because they paint at the same spot in London. They both go there to paint the scenery and they meet and they slowly start to kind of become friends. And they talk a lot about philosophy, which is really interesting, and about their own lives and how they're disappointed with them. And then the man kind of expresses that he is so grateful for their small friendship and the kindness that she showed him in his last few days and how much that actually has transformed his entire lonely life. There is a very unexpected plot twist to end it off. It made me cry. That's the giveaway. And then the next story was The Omnibus by Quiller Couch, whoever that is. And I didn't really get the point of this story either. It's basically about an old man who learns that another old man in his town has died. And so he's kind of like, yes, I'm the oldest guy in this town now. And then he starts talking about how he feels sorry for young people and not sorry for old men like himself who are on their deathbeds. And it's not super clear as to why. I didn't really understand the point of the story, but maybe I need to reread it. I did read this all in one afternoon, like I said, so And then the final story, as soon as I read the title, The Hired Baby by Marie Corelli, I remembered that yes, I read this story before, and this story very much distressed me and was tragic, and sure enough, it is still tragic. It's about a young, poor woman who hires this baby, so it's not her own child, but she kind of pays a little bit of money per day to walk around the city with it because then people give her more money as a beggar because they feel sympathy for this child that she has a baby. So then she takes in more money, but she gives some of it to the baby's mom. But the baby's mom and father are really cruel, evil people. They don't care at all about the baby. And this young girl, who originally takes on the baby kind of for her own ends, ends up becoming extremely attached to it and loving it and so protective of it that she actually steals it from its parents and just takes it to be her own child, essentially. She's the one who's going to take care of it, even though she's living on the streets and has nothing. And I don't know what else I could say without giving away what happens, but I will say the ending is very, very tragic, and it just reminds you to pay attention to the poor and the homeless and the suffering people in your own neighborhoods, because they have stories and their lives are really, really hard and really, really tragic and really, really hopeless, and yet they have the capacity to love and to hope as any of us, but often their love and their hope doesn't turn into anything and gets trampled just like they do. And so that's kind of the moral of that story. I don't know where you would find these short stories if you wanted to read them for yourself. They might be free online, they might be in other collections, but man, I'm so glad that I have this little book, and I'm sure that I will come back to it and reread some of these stories, especially The Inconsiderate Waiter and The Hired Baby. Yeah. My husband and I have started a tradition of reading each other stories, and I think these will work very well for that, where you could just read it out loud in about an hour in one sitting. And so this was kind of a funny but very fun little experiment. Yeah, if you have old books like this lying around your house that you've never actually picked up and read, I highly recommend that you do so, because you never know what kind of treasures are going to be in books that we often just kind of have to fill the space on our shelves or as decor items. And I feel like a bit of a hypocrite when I buy books just for show, because I'm a reader and I have a YouTube channel about reading, and I am really crazy and passionate about reading, so I should be reading all the books in my house and all the books that I buy instead of just using them for other purposes. Books were not written to look nice on your shelf, even though they do look really nice on your shelf. They're written to read. So that's kind of my challenge to you. If you have anything like this lying around your house that you've never picked up, pick it up and just take a look at what's inside, and you might be very pleasantly surprised like I was. So that's the end of this video. Thanks again for watching, guys. And if I look distracted in this video, it's because my husband's sitting right there playing Minecraft, and he's really cute. And it's hard not to kind of see him out of the corner of my eye. Hey, cutie.